Hi, and welcome to this episode of Bill and Kip's Excellent Adventure. My name is Kip McClurg, and this is Bill Brunson, and we're pastors at Vestavia Hills United Methodist Church. We're so grateful that you joined us for this episode. We're walking through the Gospel of John, and today we're taking 3 chapters, 15 through 17, and we're still in this what's often called the upper room discourse, which happens where Jesus is with the disciples sharing some of the most really intimate details of his relationship with the Father and how he relates to them and really what it means to be a disciple. And so today we are looking particularly at where he begins to talk about vine and branches, which I guess brings us to what's here on the table.
I have to say that whatever free flower arranging course you took, you got your money's worth, because that is not a nice centerpiece for our table.
We do encourage people not to give gifts to our family that involve living things that we're supposed to keep alive.
Yeah.
It is not, my father had the gift, did not pass it down in the DNA. But this one is talking about, Jesus says, I'm the vine, you're the branches. Talking about grapes, and of course, grapes very much a part of the culture of Israel. And of course, you would eat the grapes, you would make wine, and wine was very much a part of the culture. Of course, drinking water was dangerous then, so you would add some amount of alcohol to water on a regular basis just to make sure that you had purified water.
And the ancient symbol of Israel in the Old Testament, God was saying that Israel was his vineyard.
Yeah.
And he was the vine dresser, and Israel was his vineyard. And
so now what we have here is, since I have no vine, and we're on a very low. I was trying to catch a flight to Bordeaux to bring something that was fresher.
Nice. That would have been
but
nice.
Instead, I stole this. This is a rose branch because roses, they're kind of similar. We call them rose bush, but they're really vine growing out of the ground, and they go every which way. And we have here at the church, we have people who are very much more gifted than you and I, who tend roses as a sort of their ministry to the church. And you can see them out there, and they're having to prune at times, and they cut back, and certain times of the year because pruning is very much a part of the plant being healthy. Same is true with grapes.
Right.
So if you're, as I understand grapes, if you have a grape has a sort of a bud coming out, often they'll have 2 sort of small pieces that come off of the vine, and you have to prune one of those 2, or it pulls too much energy out of the plant for you to produce really effective grapes and really robust grapes.
Right. You get a better harvest.
Yeah.
You get a better harvest, a tastier harvest, and all, if you will eliminate one of those at the juncture.
And so there is a person who is a vine dresser, whose job it is, and to this day in a vineyard, you can't do this, you can't automate this. Someone has to be able to look at it to see which of those small branches is the healthiest and cut the other one so that the vine can produce the greatest amount. And so Jesus is comparing himself, as the Father had, to this process. And he says, I am the vine, and you are the branches. So kind of walk us through that a little bit.
Well, yeah, showing the connection of the disciples to Jesus. They are connected to Jesus. In essence, what you've done here, it's not really getting any nutrients any longer from the rose.
We're not even dying on the vine. We're off the vine.
Yeah, and
we're disconnected.
I can hold this forever and wait on it to bloom. It's just not going to bloom.
Yeah.
And so with Jesus saying he is the vine and the disciples are the branches, the connection to him is the critical piece. Oh, yes, there are going to be things in the disciples' lives that need to be pruned so that they can be the strongest and the healthiest. But they have to stay connected to the vine. And that's going to come up again and again across these few chapters, especially when we get to chapter 17, that connection. And, this is the hope and the prayer of Jesus, that the disciples stay connected to him so that they draw life from him, they grow in him, and they bear fruit for him. What you have here just withers and dies
right
away from the vine.
And really, in all human nature, in all human relationships, as we are disconnected, we tend to wither.
Yeah.
And you and I have both served in smaller churches by ourselves, where we were the only person there.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes that sense of isolation was overwhelming, but we were blessed to have connection with other pastors that sort of help us sort of stay connected. And Jesus is saying that if we're spiritually to blossom, if we're spiritually to grow, it's critical that we stay connected to Him. And so it's a beautiful image of the importance of not isolating ourselves from God. Now, there are a lot of things that can isolate us from God.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes a tragedy can make us question, well,
Right.
does God really love me? Or
Right.
I
Make
go
us
through
pull away and become very inwardly focused.
I can go through a loss of a relationship, a human relationship, that can make me ask that question. As a pastor, I've had people tell me, I lost a child and I just put God on a shelf,
Mm-hmm.
and because I didn't know what to do, but what was beautiful were those moments when they reconnected with God,
Right.
and suddenly that spiritual vitality returned into their lives. And so there are a lot of it's easy. I guess it's really hard work
Mm-hmm.
to some extent to stay connected to God.
Well, and when Jesus is talking to the disciples, because of the nature of how many vineyards were around, and they still grow a lot of grapes in Israel. In the Golan Heights area, there's a lot of vineyards that are there, and they produce wine, that is sold around the world. And so the vines are very dominant there. But it's the same image that the Apostle Paul uses later on. He just shifts the image. While talking about vines, very much what the disciples would have understood, I'm the vine, you are the branches, stay connected. The Apostle Paul, when he's in Corinth, where they actually have a shrine to a Greek god there, where they talk about the body and the issues of the body that may need to be healed and things like that. The Apostle Paul plays off of that with the Corinthians and says, hey, you're supposed to be part of the body of Christ,
Mm-hmm.
all connected one to another. You can't just remove a part of the body and that part of the body still be able to thrive all on its own sitting over here. You can't remove the hand and just lay the hand to the side, right, and it's still functioning like a hand.
And if the foot's misfunctioning, it means that it's affecting the rest of the body too.
That's right.
And so you just can't go off in Corinth and do whatever you want to do in Corinth.
Right. And so Paul uses that image because that was his community. Jesus uses the image of the vine, but it's all the same message that we have to stay connected to one another and connected to Christ, which Paul says is the head of the body. Mm-hmm. And Jesus says that he is the actual vine itself. We're all tied in.
So that's one of the pieces of teaching that happens in the discourse. Another one is this whole idea of servant friend. And he's trying to sort of shift their thoughts. He's getting ready to leave. Mm-hmm. And he's been their rabbi.
Right.
And he's wanting them to really step out of that student role and step into that leadership role and step into a different role. It reminds me, one of my favorite sermons from John Wesley is this sermon that he talks about how we have to move from having the faith of a servant to the faith of a son, where our faith shifts. We no longer see God as this sort of employer that's never quite happy with, is going to scream at you when you mess up.
Right.
Versus the son, who the father has everything invested in the son walking into the inheritance and taking mm-hmm. over the farm or the business or whatever. And so there are going to be moments where the father's going to do some correcting. Mm-hmm. But it's out of love,
right?
Because
Absolutely.
of what.
Yes.
And so when you start seeing God not as that person who is distantly and always kind of flustered just because that's just how they are, to this person that really has a purpose for your life. And I think that's kind of the same thing that we're seeing here. Jesus is moving that relationship. I want you to be my friend. I don't want you to be a servant, but be with me. Even though I'm the vine and you're the branches. Still, I want you to be moving to that role where you see me as your friend.
Yeah, it's moving from that. It's moving from a functional relationship to an intimate relationship.
Right.
It's the, if you are an employer, you have the people that work for you, that you have that level of relationship with them. You provide the resources for them to live because you pay their wages. They provide you the skill that you need to accomplish your task. It is a relationship, but it's all functional. It's all based off of that kind of thinking. But then you also have your friends. And your friends are the ones that you will do anything for. And it doesn't matter if they can do anything for you back. It's not an even thing.
Right.
It's not trying to balance. I get this much work out of you, therefore I pay you this much. With a friend, it's not connected to that. With a friend, it is, I see that you need this. It doesn't matter if you can pay me back. It doesn't matter what. I want to be there for you. I care about you. And that's the relationship Jesus is wanting to have with the disciples, that they are so connected into the vine, that they are so connected that it is a true relationship, an intimate relationship versus a functional relationship.
So we're seeing that shift. And then he comes back and says, and I'm going to be leaving you. But I've sent, and this is, we talked about this early in the series, I'm sending the Paraclete, which is we had a lot of fun with that word. It sounds like parakeet, Paraclete.
Mm-hmm.
But it's only used in John, and very rarely used in John. But it's this idea of the comforter, the friend, that person that's going to be with you in the hardest of days.
Right.
That's going to be with you. I'm sending the Holy Spirit, the Paraclete, to be with you, and so he continues that sense of, be prepared. I'm leaving, but I've got a plan. Don't panic.
Mm-hmm. Because he tells them, in his be prepared moments, he tells them, and be prepared. The people around here aren't very, very fond of me right now. There's a thing called guilty by association. If you think they're not fond of me, just wait. They're really not going to be fond of you. And so it is that connected, trying to keep them connected one to another and letting them know that the Paraclete will be with them. The Comforter, this friend that will stay with them always, is going to be there when the world turns against them. And we know, if you read the Acts of the Apostles, the world turns against them. If you read the church history of what happens to the apostles,
right,
the world turns against them.
For 3 centuries,
yes,
the world was against them.
Right.
But interestingly, for 3 centuries, the church grew faster than it ever had.
Absolutely.
And even still, the growth rate was greater there than ever. So chapter 17 is an interesting one as you continue to move through this. They're still in the upper room, and Jesus begins this prayer for himself, and it's fascinating to look at he and the relation he has with the Father, similar to other language that we've seen earlier in John. But then he adds a prayer for the disciples, because they're going to be facing. He knows he has a sense of what he's about to face, and then again, guilt by association, what those disciples are going to face. And then he prays, interestingly, for all the believers, the ones that maybe not believers, the ones like us. And he is praying for them and for their growth and for their strength in the midst of everything to come.
And he prays that everyone, the disciples, and all believers who come after, that line that he says is that they will be one, as he's talking to God, they'll be one as we are one. So just as connected as the Godhead, that intimate relationship of Father, Son, and Spirit, Creator, Redeemer, Sustainer, that intimate relationship that is so interwoven between them, he prays that the disciples and that all believers, all of us, will be that connected to one another, woven into the branches, part of the body of Christ, that we are that connected. We are as one with each other as Jesus and God are one. That's a powerful prayer.
Well, and it's a powerful thought, because we live in a world where we're so often, so driven by the idea that everything's by chance, that it just happens, that the third rock is from the sun and that we're on it, and then the whole, why we're here is pure chance and just luck. But what is so beautiful about what Jesus is saying is that every human being can be connected to something so much older than them that goes back centuries and millennia into this relationship with God who created the world, and the Logos who became Jesus was there at the beginning of creation, there with the disciples, has sent the Paraclete, and we're all part of the same package.
And so in our human desire that seems to be just in us, to want to be a part of something big, to want to be a part of something bigger than ourselves, and we know that when we are a part of something bigger than ourselves, usually we find a level of fulfillment in our life that we don't get otherwise when we're when we're cut off and separate. Jesus is telling us in this that we have the opportunity to be not only part of something bigger than ourselves right now, but part of something bigger than ourselves that is eternal, that always has been and always will be, and we get to be part of that.
And the future will be connected back to us as we're connected back to the Father.
Right.
What an incredible and exciting way to live.
It is, absolutely.